Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and his family accepting the vice presidential nomination of the Democratic Party, giving, to my untrained ear, a pretty perfect speech. The part where he said, I haven't given a lot of big speeches like this one in my life, but I've given a lot of pep talks. And the crowd erupted in coach, 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 coach. The final nominating speech for him tonight from one of the young men in his life who he has both taught and coached, and then being joined by the Mankato West football players who he brought to the state championship. This was a very USA kind of speech. The sight of his son Gus and his daughter Hope weeping as their dad took to the stage is really something. Jen.
I mean, I love Gus Walz. I'm going to start ugly crying right now talking about him, just watching his kids react to him. I know. but watching his kids react to him, I mean, as a mom, you know he's a good guy, you know, because if you can have kids who wear their hearts on their sleeves like that as adults, you know he's a good guy. But I was watching that thinking, what percentage of people in that room knew who he was 4 weeks ago?
Yes.
A tiny percentage of people. And now he is like everybody's coach, everybody's teacher, he's the neighbor. And it wasn't, to Lawrence's point earlier, a partisan speech. I mean, I loved that line. I also loved in the beginning when he said, growing up in a small town like that, you learn to take care of each other. The family down the road, they may not think like you do, they may not pray like you do, they may not love like you do, but they're your neighbors and you look out for them. And that is a harken back to Obama in 2004. It is also an incredibly powerful, joyful message to the public after years of being downtrodden by the world of Trump.
And explicitly saying, here's the part you clip and save and send to that undecided relative.
Yes.
And talking about being a veteran, talking about being a hunter, talking about being a gun owner. I was a better shot than most Republicans in Congress, and I have the trophies to prove it. But I'm also a dad, and I believe in the Second Amendment, while I believe in our first responsibility is to keep our kids safe.
It's how he embodies the American dream, right? For all the criticisms of our country and the complaints, this guy grew up squarely in the middle class in Nebraska, right? He lost his dad. He went on to serve in the military. He became a teacher and a coach. And tonight, he got on the stage at the DNC. Forget your politics. It does not matter what you believe politically. That boy from Nebraska got on stage, and he might be the next vice president of the United States. If that's not the best of the American dream, then nothing is.
Jacob Soboroff is in the room, and I believe was able to make some connections with some of the Walz folks who we just all saw on stage a moment ago.
That's right, Rachel. I'm here side stage. Let me just show you where I am. And we ended up just in this remarkable position. This is where Governor Walz just spoke. And right here in the backstage area, let me just swing around and show you where we are. This is where the family was all staging. And so just minutes before the entire Walz family walked out and sat in those seats right in the front of the stage here at the United Center, I had an opportunity to talk to some. These are faces that are so new and so fresh to American politics. Frankly, I don't even know what members of the family they were. But you saw two of the young women down in front wearing the white dresses. To me, my impression is just so remarkably normal after what we've been through over the course of the last 4 years. One of the young women in the Walz family said to me, they were watching MSNBC earlier today, and they saw us talking about Minnesota and the Minnesota delegation. One of them said to me, are we supposed to wave? I don't really know what we're supposed to do once we go up on stage. Are we supposed to hold our hands up like this? Or what do we do? We've all been talking about it amongst the family. And so that's just my reaction down here after spending some time with them as they waited to go out and see Governor Walz speak, is that they feel like they could be your neighbors, they could be your classmates, they could be folks that you work with in your office. Just remarkably normal.
Speaking of a deeply normal and also hard to believe moment was the football players from Mankato West walking out onto the stage. We had word that there might be additional players from the team, or in addition to this one young man who we're going to hear from, there might be. I had no idea it was going to be like that. The room in here, in terms of our little crowd at MSNBC Mothership, everybody got out of their seats and started stamping and clapping and oh my God, I can't believe this. What was that like in the room, Jacob?
I cannot. I mean, I was probably 6 feet away from half of the football team on this side of the stage. The wattage of the smiles on their faces, it just screamed, I cannot believe I am standing on this stage right now in front of the entire American, not just forget about the people of the United Center, but in front of the United States of America as the state championship football team from this small town in Minnesota. It was like we're all living it with them down here, and it was a really incredible thing to experience.
Jacob, thank you very much. There is nothing more real, Chris Hayes, than still having your uniform shirt.
I love that moment.
Your jersey from when you won the state championship.
You get the call, you're like, yes.
Yes, I have.
Are you getting on a flight to Chicago with your jersey? I am getting on a flight to Chicago with my jersey.
Does it fit? I can't hear.
I don't care.
It doesn't matter. It always fits. It's my jersey.
That's
amazing.
Yeah, it's when you take a step back, there's something just so remarkable and shocking that it's like the Republicans are the ones with like the New York City real estate dealer at the top of the ticket,
and the venture capitalist,
and then the Democrats have like the Midwestern football coach and teacher who like had the state championship. Just like every sort of culture war trope inverted it on itself. And I just think, look, Walz has an incredible biography, I said at the beginning, but he is an incredibly effective communicator.
Yeah.
And he is a professional. He didn't just walk out of Mankato West yesterday. He is a political professional. He is a very deft political communicator. And that was a 10 out of 10 effective speech in a short period of time, established his bio, vouched for Kamala Harris, did a lot about his record substantively in policy, and laid out a very popular agenda for Kamala Harris, all while sort of hitting the other party and the other nominees. Short and sweet and compact and effective in his inimitable style. The guy is just a supremely effective communicator.
Yeah, and not a breath wasted.
You know, I did not have a guess as to who Kamala Harris would pick as vice president. I was sure she would make the right pick with all the information that they had, vetting and her own interaction with them. But imagine someone else being the VP pick, and that guy going up on the stage tonight for the 5 minutes they would have given him, 6 minutes they would have given him. You'd just be sitting there saying, what about him? But I can't think of a better launch of a vice presidential campaign that we've seen, especially with an unknown, someone who, as Chris says, was basically an unknown a very short time ago to many, including me, by the way. He was on my show a couple of times, but I couldn't remember it, and it was years ago. But, you know, in the very beginning of his speech, he was talking about his life. And in his life, this became a very important sentence in his life. He said, "Thank God for Social Security survivor benefits." No one on the Republican ticket knows what Social Security survivor benefits are, and when they kick in, who gets them, and what they mean in a life that desperately needs Social Security survivor benefits. And this speech goes throughout, making very simple connections, and that word neighbor just keeps coming up. He makes this about neighbors. He doesn't even talk about voters. He talks about neighbors and connecting with neighbors. And that golden rule, mind your own damn business, he delivers with a freshness every time that is so effective and powerful. It's just such a powerful theme about what this campaign is about.
Let's go to Chicago, where our beloved colleagues, Alex and Joy, are watching alongside all of us and alongside all the thousands of delegates. Vibes check, ladies. Vibes check. Is this thing on?
I think we just saw an episode of Ted Lasso, basically. If you watch that show, that's basically what this just was, right? I mean, I could see how he won football games. I could see being, the kids on that football team got a speech like that. No wonder they went from 0 wins to winning a championship. That man is really talented. And what's so cool about it, think about this. If you moved into a neighborhood and you moved onto a block where you had a really cool lady on one end of the street, Oprah, right? The really rich lady with the big house, but you also had the really cool musical political family, John Legend. And then you also had like the really sort of nerdy, guy with like a McKinsey job and a cool husband and kid, Buttigieg. And then you've got the football coach and your favorite social studies teacher, the guy who coaches the football team, but who also gives you advice at Home Depot for like a half an hour when you're like, Roto-Rooter or whatever and your house is broken. This is a neighborhood that anyone would want to live in. And that is what I have felt in this space, especially today. The Democrats have constructed the neighborhood that anybody would want to buy a house in and move their family to. Tim Walz capped it this time. Brilliant. Well done.
The reality is that this man is the governor of Minnesota, right? And the signs, I'm sure all of you in New York have seen, say Coach Walz. They don't say Governor Walz, they don't say Congressman Walz, they say Coach Walz. And that is a very deliberate choice, right? I think what we have seen, if there is a theme that has run through some of the most prominent speakers at this convention, from Barack Obama to Bill Clinton to Tim Walz tonight, it is the theme of outreach and empathy and national reconciliation. Obama yesterday was saying, don't demean your neighbors. If a parent or a grandparent occasionally says something that makes us cringe, we don't automatically assume they're bad people. Clinton tonight says, talk to your neighbors. Meet people where they are. Don't demean them. The football thing, the coach thing, that is a form of conservative outreach. The reliance on the football metaphor is a way of opening up the Democratic tent to skeptics, to people who feel culturally like they've been divorced from the Democratic Party for a long time and say, come on in. The water's fine. You will see yourself reflected in this party. The guy we're putting at the second highest position on the ticket is a football coach. That's why those signs tonight said Coach Walz and not Governor Walz.
I need to go to the Minnesota delegation right now because I think that Jacob Soboroff is about to be crowd surfing or something. You okay? You okay?
Rachel, I can't hear a damn thing, but I'll save one of these for you.
Thank you.
They're handing out Tim Walz heads. Guys, how are you feeling right now?
Fabulous!
How you doing? How you feeling?
Excited about our new leadership. Excited about what democracy for America. Excited about it.
Like I said, I cannot hear a damn thing that anybody's saying, but everybody is very, very excited in the Minnesota delegation.
Speaking of excitement, there's one little squib of tape that I want to play, which is the moment we discussed it earlier, where Gus Walz, the son of Tim Walz, with tears in his eyes said, "That's my dad." Do we have that? All right. With his dad on the stage. You see both Hope and Gus Walz. That's my dad. Both Hope and Gus Walz tearing up, seeing their dad up there. Oh, that moment. Joy and Alex, is Minnesota still going?
Can I just say, in the words of the great Teddy Riley, it ain't over. The party's not over. They ain't going on.
Minnesota's still at it. Just FYI, guys.
That hotel lobby's going to be lit.
Ain't no party like a Minnesota delegation party. Can I say something about the Gus Walz thing? There has been a lot of talk about masculinity and MAGAism trying to own masculinity in the most regressive, sort of misogynist way possible. J.D. Vance lecturing everybody on, what a family means, what it means to be a man. Donald Trump obviously has his own version of manhood. To see Tim Walz out there as a man who is just joyfully embracing his role as the potential vice president to the nation's first female president is an extraordinary thing. But also to see his son weeping for his father in a deeply tender and emotional way. And then the last thing I'll say, because I think this hasn't been talked about enough, to see Democrats champion men as voices on reproductive choice.
Yeah.
As you saw yesterday, I believe, from Amanda Zarowski's husband, tonight from Tim Walz, talking about struggles with infertility. It takes two partners to get pregnant. And for way too long, this conversation has been relegated to women or the carriers of pregnancies. And it is, I think, way overdue to have men express not only their stake in all this, but also their anguish. And to have a football coach talk about the anguish of infertility, I think opens up a whole new conversation about the stakes at hand for 2024.
And by the way, and I love that you're saying that, because this is about modern masculinity.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the Democratic Party, the coach that is saying that it's important for him as the football coach to be the faculty, partner for the LGBTQ
Gay
club,
Straight Alliance.
The Gay Straight Alliance. And he's like, that's something important for me to do, because if a coach is doing it, it's going to have just a little more salience, right? And it's going to help kids not get bullied. I mean, what's really been fascinating is to watch the men of the Democratic Party model a kind of masculinity that is simply 21st century masculinity.
Speaking of 21st century masculinity, how about that? How about
Look at that as a setup.
That lead in? We got Senator Cory Booker.
I was like, who's it going to be?
Who could it be? But
See how we did that?
The 21st century man himself, Senator Booker. Tonight was your night as chairing the events.
Yes.
We're talking about this kind of redefinition of masculinity in the wake of a Republican National Convention that offered a very reductive vision to the country. What'd you make of Coach Walz tonight?
There's a deep decency and kindness about him. And I said this to somebody. It actually is the perfect handoff, because the Joe Biden I got to know during the 2020 presidential campaigns, I always say, when somebody's nice to you but not nice to the waiter, they're not a nice person.
Real talk.
And that is Joe Biden, but I'm telling you, that is Governor Walz too.
They're nice to the waiters.
Yeah.
They are nice to the waiters. They have this love in them that you could feel before you hear. I wish America could have seen when he came backstage and was just embraced by all the football guys hanging out there. It was this love huddle. Like as a former football player, it was a love huddle back there. The genuineness of their connection, of their affection. A bunch of guys huddled up in a love huddle. And I'm telling you, that's what we need in America. We have got to turn the page on the meanness, the viciousness, the put-downs, to have a president that will go after you if you're even in his own party. The way he talked about, my friend Chris Christie's weight, the way he talked about Nikki Haley's heritage, John McCain's military service, DeSantis' height. I mean, come on. Do you expect that from the President of the United States of America? No. Donald Trump is indiscriminate in his viciousness. We need kindness again. We need joy again. We need pragmatic policy making again.
And by the way, one of the lines, and I think probably the log line for the speech that Tim Walz gave tonight is, we've got something better to offer the American people. It's just such a simple idea. I mean, he kind of reinforced what Bill Clinton did in his speech, in which he did lay out that, and I did fact check it, I quickly fact checked it, that in fact, 97.4% of the jobs created since 1989 were created between Clinton, Obama, and Biden. Donald Trump had negative job creation, and Bush and the two Bushes only got like 3%. So, I mean, they're making a case that's like backed by data, but they're also making a case that's backed by vibes. I mean, people in this, everyone felt included, for whether they were a Republican, an independent. Oprah Winfrey got up and said, hey guys, I'm an independent, and I'm down with this.
Yes. And she also has no children as one of these.
She said we're going to help the childless cat ladies get out of the house,
We'll rescue the cat. We'll rescue the cat. Shout out to cats.
Shout out to the El Gatos.
I think that those folks, by the way, are perfect.
See what you did there?
They're catastic.
Pick it up what you're putting down there. Pick it up what you're putting down there.
But look, I am telling you right now, America has a clear choice, and I'm really hoping that they choose love, kindness, decency. And again, the best book I ever have that I won't write is all the mistakes I made in my first year as mayor of the city of Newark. And I made hiring mistakes. I finally learned how to hire. The three things I go. It's not your skill first. The first thing I look to hire is your moral compass, your values. Do we have shared values? Then I look at your synergy for my team. Are you going to bring that kind of spirit? Then I get to things like your ideas, your training, and all of that. Here are two people that bring a synergy and an energy and bring a value system. I do not have to worry about turning on the TV and seeing Harris or Walz just demeaning, degrading, being vicious. I still remember that trauma of waking up and seeing, what did Donald Trump tweet today? Yeah. What did he say about countries overseas, calling them S-hole countries? What did he do about people that were kind on both sides of the aisle? What did he tell people to do about their health issues to inject bleach? Every day it was something different. But with this, I tell you, when I saw Michelle and Barack, look, I miss Obama. I miss her husband. I really miss Obama.
She got a million of them tonight.
She should have been the last speech of the night. I love you, Barack. But she should have been the last speech of the night.
Closer.
Yes. But when it just reminded you of those days where we did not have to every single day have this sort of like outrageousness.
And the exhaustion from the outrage.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, people are over it. I mean, he said, I don't know about you all, but I'm ready to turn the page. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries in his Jay-Z adjacent style, laying out, we broke up with you, it's over. And I do think that people forgot that the politics of nice was actually viable, even though you are the politics. I mean, you're shoveling people's like the driveways, but it works. And it works. But people like maybe that works in New Jersey, but not in the country. Like, has maybe people just run out of patience.
Well, let me tell you something.
The other thing.
The thing I remember during the Trump years is having high-level military leaders. Remember, Trump's Secretary of Defense isn't out there endorsing it. It's the military people, they know that leaders, real leaders, you hear things like leaders eat last. They put everybody else first. Leaders, the last person out of danger. There is a honor and a sacrifice from leaders that you expect, not people that's all about me, only I can see. The best leaders I know in the military build great teams and support them. And so there is a lesson in leadership. It's not just about kindness. It's actually about what it takes to create a great organization. We are one nation with one destiny. We need to improve our organization, or as John Lewis would say, the beloved community. Who is best of these candidates to create that beloved community, to create a Team America sense again? Is it Donald Trump, or is it Coach Walz and Kamala Harris? That's what I want back in the White House.
Senator Booker, it's Rachel Maddow. It is. Can you hear me? You have an IFB. Can you hear me, Senator Booker?
I hear you loud and clear.
Very
loud
good.
And clear. I hear you.
I have a football question for you. We go all the way back to your football days, and I just, as a football player and as somebody who I think is actually very subtle and skilled about talking about not just gender but masculinity and about heteronormativity and all these other things that a lot of other politicians don't want to go anywhere near. You've been brave about it and strong about it. As somebody who's lived your life in that part of the way and who knows what that means to people when they find out you're a varsity football player at Stanford, it means something to a lot of people who otherwise only know you as a politician. What do you think it meant to the country tonight to see those football players in their jerseys, his team, come out on stage to support Coach Walz?
Well, all of us that play ball, we've all had amazing coaches that we would literally run through walls for. And we've had bad coaches. And that's why I said earlier, what I saw when he came backstage, no cameras, the realness of the connection he had to his players, the love that they had for him reminded me of my great coaches. And let me tell you something about football that we often, and it's inadequate and probably in many ways way too far, but we often compare sports, bleeding together, sweating together, fighting together. We often make military allusions, but there's one consistent that is true. When you go through 3-a-days with guys, when you get driven to the point of sheer exhaustion, literally watching guys throw up after wind sprints and then having to get back to the line and go again, it strips a lot of you away, and you get to see what guys are really about. And it creates an intimacy on that field and a love and bonds that can't be faked. This is why, for me as an ex-ball player, I want a coach that knows that lived that is that in the White House as part of that team. When I heard that he was a coach and a kind of a coach that said, I'm going to use my footballness to also embrace the LGBTQ community. I'm going to use my footballness to talk about issues that too far and too long have been in the shadows, like IVF. I'm going to use that masculinity that is a privilege in this society to shine a light on people that are left out. This guy is a different kind of guy, the kind of guy that we all know, the kind of guy that we all love and would follow as his players did. But I can't wait for him to be vice president of the United States, because when he gets up there and starts talking about issues, Like the fact that we as a nation have not done any of the research on things like menopause, or have a terrible problem with things like maternal mortality. Guy like that looking people in the eye and say, hey, we have a real problem still with black women dying in childbirth because we don't listen to them and about their pain. This could be really a kind of epic leader that's going out of his what people would put as his sort of brand or cast, but somebody that truly can talk to all of America.
Senator Cory Booker, always a privilege to talk to you under any circumstances, anywhere, but particularly tonight, especially because you had a long night on stage tonight, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you.
So, consider this to be your official ask. Michelle Obama is asking you, no, I'm telling y'all to do something. Because
the room erupted there in a chant of do something. Perfect segue to our next guest. Joining us now, former Democratic Congressman from Texas, Beto O'Rourke, who is always doing something. He's in Texas, hundreds of miles from the convention, putting in the work every day on voter outreach to help get Kamala Harris and his friend Tim Walz elected in November. I feel like every time we've tried to book you on the show, you've been in your car going somewhere to do something, to talk to voters, to reach out to voters, to respond to a crisis voters are having. And I wonder what you make of this attempt to use this convention as a mobilization week. How vital is that, to take the enthusiasm and get people to quote Michelle Obama, do something?
I'm so glad that you played that clip from the former First Lady. That has to be the message. You know, I think in this age where we're so divided from one another, so polarized politically as a country, so isolated in part because of the devices that consume all of our attention and energy, to be asked not to do something because it's easy or convenient, but to, you know, paraphrase JFK, to be asked to do something because, in fact, it is hard, like going out in the 108-degree Texas heat on the University of North Texas campus with our volunteers and register voters and talk to young people about this election, listen to them about their concerns, and connect them with the candidates who I think are going to fight for them effectively in the White House, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. That's what it takes. And I've seen, you know, more convention speeches than I can probably count. That ranks among the best of all time because it was the call to action that we need right now. And it meets the urgency of this moment with the path that is going to get us there, registering people to vote, getting the vote out after people are registered, talking to our friends, family members, classmates, colleagues, and neighbors. That's what it's going to take. So I love the focus on action because it is the antidote to despair and it is the key to victory.
I love that you said that. You know, the despair, I think, captures a lot of the stories that I've covered here. And listening to Michelle Obama talk about how the despair and the dread and the pit in the stomach. I mean, to be honest, that's how you feel sometimes when you sit down and get ready to cover the latest norm obliterated by Trump, or insult hurled at Chairman Mark Milley, or threat to our democracy, or Supreme Court ruling that further emboldens him and offers him absolute immunity for official acts. What do you make of this convention as an antidote to despair, but also as a reminder of our agency as voters? If you feel like the justice system failed, go vote. If you feel like the 2 impeachments of Trump failed, go vote. Putting it back in the hands of the voters to do something meaningful in November.
Absolutely. You know, get us off the sidelines, put us into the game, remind us of the agency that each of us possesses in this democracy. You know, it's both a freedom, it's an opportunity, but it's also somewhat of a burden that you don't have in Saudi Arabia or in Russia or Iran or North Korea or so much of the rest of the world right now, but a burden that we happily shoulder today because it gives us a chance to decide our own destiny, and only because of those who preceded us, you know, going back to the Revolution at Lexington and Concord, up through Appomattox in 1865, to 1965 when John Lewis leads that march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to secure the right to vote for everyone in this country, regardless of your race, your religion, your ethnicity, your country of national origin, creating the first true multinational democracy in American history, or multi-ethnic democracy, a real democracy of the people. Those who preceded us with their blood, sweat, and tears, and in many cases their lives, gave us this extraordinary inheritance. And what we do with it, whether we squander it or whether we expand it, which is really the choice that we have in selection, that's going to define this generation for eternity, and certainly in the eyes of our kids and our grandkids. So, no pressure, but we can't afford to mess this one up. And I love that instead of meeting that with fear or anxiety, we meet it with this bold, cool confidence that Michelle Obama brought to the convention last night. And then, of course, President Barack Obama, just one of the greatest orators of my lifetime, who delivered the speech that we needed to hear last night. I was on a high by the end of the second night of the convention, and really excited about what we're going to hear tonight.
One more thing about the Obamas, and then I want to ask you about your friend, Governor Walz. He addressed some of what you're talking about. You mentioned people staring at their devices. He said, we're obsessed and attached to fleeting things, fame, money, likes. And then he tied it to loneliness, which I think only accelerated after COVID, but has been skillfully exploited by Donald Trump. That loneliness, that grievance. And I thought it was interesting that his own former press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, talked about his hatred for his own supporters, who she said he refers to as basement dwellers. What did you make of the Obamas sort of speaking to the isolation as one of the tools of the wannabe autocrats?
It's definitely a crisis of this time. And I'm sure I'm speaking for millions of parents out there. Amy and I are raising a 17, a 16, and a 13-year-old. And it is a daily, if not hourly, challenge to make sure that we're connected, eye to eye, looking at one another when we talk to each other, having these bonds that I probably took for granted growing up in a pre-digital age, as did you, but is a really serious concern right now. Interestingly, when I'm on all these college campuses, I was at Texas A&M today and then at Houston Community College just before joining you. One of the first questions I get from young people that were signing up to get registered to vote is, where do I find the facts? And it's a funny question because when I was growing up, it was the El Paso Times, it was the nightly newscast, it was McNeil Lehrer on PBS, whatever my folks were watching. For young people today, they don't have newspaper subscriptions. They're not watching broadcast TV. Unfortunately, they may not be watching you either. They're consuming this stuff off of TikTok and Instagram and other social media platforms. And they can be forgiven for being overwhelmed by that and not knowing what's real. Showing up in person, connecting with people, having conversations about the future of this country. I know it's not easy. I know it's not digital. I know it's not convenient, but I think that's where the action is. And that's where we bring people back together again and defeat this isolationism, which truly is a breeding ground for extremism for those who get led down the wrong path. And so this convention literally physically is the embodiment of people coming together. And I think that's why you see so many smiles on so many faces, so much joy in the room. Now we got to go out there into our home communities and bring that message and that joy and those conversations to people where they are.
I feel you times a million on the daily, hourly struggles to keep our kids connected to us and not what tempts them on their screens. Enter Tim Walz. I spoke to one of his students about the impact he had on the classroom, and it was just what you're talking about. He said one of the homework assignments was not to go home alone and read a book for hours and hours, but to come back to the classroom with an article about the world in which they live. He said it expanded the world of their small town. Tell me what you think we'll hear tonight from your friend, Governor Tim Walz.
I think the more personal, the closer it is to his life and experiences, the more we hear him in his own words. I think the deeper the connection that this guy is going to make. One of the reasons I consider him a good friend, and probably so many of my colleagues with whom I served along with Tim Walz consider him a friend, is he wasn't one of these guys consumed by his device. He wasn't skipping into the committee hearing to give his speech and then bouncing out to get on cable TV or post something on social media. He'd stay the full meeting. He's a real guy having real conversations about real things going on in his life. And I think there's an incredible exceptionalism to his kind of service. And it's really a wonderful story about America, that a guy who just keeps his head down, does the work, gets things done for those he's supposed to serve, like veterans for whom he delivered on the VA committee, is now elevated to this position of prominence as the vice presidential nominee. So I'd love to hear more about his story, his ethic, how he got here, and also those things that kind of defy the typical political course: social studies teacher, lunchroom monitor, football coach who takes his team to the state championship, 24 years in the Army National Guard, a loving husband and a wonderful dad who you cannot get to stop talking about his kids because he's so proud of them. So I just love that Walz is on the ticket, and I think he's such a big boost to our chances to win the White House in November.
All right.
Many viewers may also know you for taking on Donald Trump, as you said you would in your campaigns, and dealing with the civil fraud case against him in your jurisdiction in New York. So here for more than one reason. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's start with how Michelle Obama put it and the history that I raised, that there has not been as many states that have gone forward with breaking these barriers, and what you thought of what she said and what Kamala Harris thus represents.
So she dropped the mic. She was electric. She was magnificent. And Barack Obama, unfortunately, had to follow her. But at the end of the day, there are two black women attorney generals. My little sister from Massachusetts, Adrienne Adams, and there are a number of elected officials in the state of New York who are my friends and who are my colleagues. We have a speaker who's African American. We have a number of members in the Senate and in the legislature. We have a Senate Majority Leader in the state of New York, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. And so we are leading by example. But the reality is that we do have our challenges. We need more women in the United States Senate. We need more black women attorney generals. We need more we definitely need a black woman governor, a number of black women governors. But the reality is that, you know, breaking a glass ceiling is nothing more than a historical footnote. The question really that I pose to individuals is, what do you do with the power that's in your hand? And so Michelle Obama talked about being transformative. And as the Attorney General of the state of New York, I've used the law both as a sword and as a shield of representing the interests of individuals who've historically been locked out of the sunshine of opportunity, and bringing more voices to the table of power. And as the Attorney General of the state of New York, I've stood against bullies who recognize and think that they're above the law, but they are not. You know, we examine cases based on facts and based on evidence, not based on politics. And when the facts and the evidence against basically constitute a case of fraud, a pattern and practice of fraud and illegality, I have a duty and a responsibility to follow the law and to file a case. And I am prepared. You know, Donald Trump called me a number of names. He threatened my life. But that's okay, because faith and fear cannot share the same space. And I've got a responsibility and a duty to stand up and uphold the law.
Well, that's the other thing you have in common with Kamala Harris, your experience facing down Donald Trump as a civil defendant, and as you were careful to reiterate, not in your mind politically. But what did you learn or glean from that experience that might be relevant to her running against him and, if it holds, facing him in a debate next month?
To ignore the noise and to focus on the facts and to focus on issues that New Yorkers and Americans as a whole are facing, such as price gouging, such as individuals who believe that the rent is too damn high. Focus on fraud, illegality, privacy breaches. Focus on those issues that people care about. Inflation is going down, and I'm happy about that. But, and the Democrats obviously are focusing on the felt needs of Americans, and that's really critically important. And we've got to speak to those felt needs. And we have to not be distracted by individuals who call us noise because they look small. And we will not be small because we've got a job to do, and that is representing the interests of Americans right now. And Kamala Harris is the most experienced candidate for president. In fact, she's more experienced than the last 4 presidents as the district attorney, as the attorney general of California, the largest state in the nation, as a United States senator who has traveled the globe and met with heads of state, and as the vice president of these United States. She is prepared on day one to step into the Oval Office and to get things done. We can return to normalcy once again, and she can bring the joy and she can bring the unity that we are all so desperately seeking. And last but not least, we will not cringe when we see President Harris give a press conference or make some comments. We will not, again, be, embarrassed by individuals who, again, are reduced to a very small figure. What we need, again, is a large figure in the office of the White House, and someone who will lead us and someone who we all will be proud of. And that, my friends, is President Kamala Harris. And I look forward that one glorious day to say, Madam President.
It sounded like a strong closing argument, but that's what you're known for. I'm going to toss it back to Joy inside the hall.
Yes, indeed. And I want to allow you just for a moment. There are, as you've mentioned, there have only been a small number of attorneys general who are black women. You are in a rarefied group of 3 that we know of, right? And Kamala Harris being one of the 3. Can you talk about some of the personal characteristics that you know about her, taking aside the politics, what it takes to be an AG, to hold that position, and specifically as a black woman, and anything that you can give us insights into her that you think would make her a strong president?
So as the Attorney General of the great state of New York, I had the honor and privilege of working with Attorney General Becerra, who was the Attorney General of California. And I work with all of the Attorney Generals all across this nation. We have brought lawsuits against opioid to address the opioid crisis. We have brought lawsuits against social media because we are concerned about the addictive algorithms that are addicting our children. We are concerned about the environment and making sure that children and individuals of color are not victims of environmental injustice, that they can drink clean air, that they can have clean air and drink clean water, that we've removed lead paint from pipes, particularly in communities of color. All you need to do is look to the issues. And there are just so many issues and so many individuals who are struggling right now, who need attorneys, who are not afraid to walk into the courtroom and say, I am the Attorney General of their respective state, and we are here to address an injustice. And these are the facts, and this is the law, and we want a remedy and/or damages, and we want it because obviously these individuals are entitled to it. And for far too long, they've been ignored, and they will be ignored no more.
I have to throw in the Jamaican American Coalition is a little bit excited. I know you're a member.
Yes.
I got a lot of family members that are members as well. Very quickly, how excited are the Jamaican Americans about Kamala Harris?
I know. This is just really an exciting moment. Yeah. Back in my beloved Brooklyn, people are just jumping up and down with joy and happiness. But most importantly, we're bringing this nation together as one, and we're returning to normalcy. That's what we want.